Welcome to lesson number 8. So today we're looking at multiplying and dividing fractions. So yesterday we did adding and subtracting. Now we're doing multiplying and dividing. So what is it today that you're looking for success? I can successfully multiply and divide fractions. Okay, so that is your goal for today. All right, so let's see if you remember your rules for multiplying fractions. If I keep it in terms of letters, so just think of it as numbers. So if I have a fraction a over b, and I want to multiply it to a fraction that is c over d, what is the rule? Does anyone remember? Another trick question. I can't see your hands, guys. Come on. How many times are you going to fall for that? Anyhow, you multiply your numerators together, and you multiply your denominators together. So the resulting fraction would be a times c over b times d. Okay? So step 1, multiply numerators. Step 2, multiply the denominators. And that's it. You have multiplied two fractions together when you have completed this. Excellent. All right. Now, rules when dividing fractions. So, if I have a over b dividing, I better use the division symbol so it's less confusing, divided by c over d, how do you do this? Okay, again, I can't see your hands, guys. I'm hoping, and I know it's better this way, because if I asked you, some people will say we'll cross multiply, and that makes me scream. It makes any math teacher scream. Okay? When we're dividing, the rule is this. We never, ever, ever, ever divide fractions. It's very, very challenging. We'd sooner do multiplication, because multiplication is much easier. So we leave the first fraction. We now change our division sign to multiplication, and you flip the second fraction. And then you can multiply. All right? So we use our rules for multiplication at that point. So the answer would be a times d divided by b times c. So the rules, change sign, oops, I was going to put sing, change sign to multiplication. Step 2, flip the second fraction. Flip the second fraction. Third step is multiply fractions. All right. So there are your steps or rules to multiplying and dividing fractions. And if you forgot how to multiply fractions, so step 3, there it is right up there. Multiply numerators, multiply denominators. So there we go. We now know how to multiply and divide fractions. So I'm going to do a couple of examples. All right. So multiply or divide the following fractions. So I'm going to mix them up. So let's start with the multiplication. So 2/3 multiplied by 5/6. So the rule is, for multiplication, multiply your numerator and multiply your denominators. So that means my final answer, 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times 6 is 18. Now, bonus marks for people that realize you can reduce this. Both of them are divisible by 2. Okay? Is that necessary? In real life, it kind of is necessary, but for this section in the homework and on the test, I'm more interested in can you multiply and divide. So don't get panicky about the reducing part. All right, let's go with 5/7 multiplied by 3/4. Okay. So the rule again, you multiply your numerators together, you multiply your denominators together. So 5 times 3 is 15, 7 times 4, 28. Okay? Do a couple of dividing examples. So let's go with 2/7 divided by, let's go with 3/4. Not that that's overly hard. Okay, so you look back at your instructions, and this is the instructions I'm going to follow. Okay, we got to change the sign to multiplication. And I have the second. I was worried I forgot about the second fraction. I'm going to work down here. So leave the first fraction alone. Change to multiplication. Flip the second fraction. Okay, leave the first fraction. Change to multiplication. Flip the second fraction. Now you're just multiplying. It's the exact same question as number 1 and number 2. So we multiply the numerators, which would give us 8. We multiply the denominators. It gives us 21. Okay? Another dividing example. What happens if we have 3/5 divided by 1/9? Okay? So, looking at your steps there, leave the first fraction. Change to multiplication. Flip the second fraction. And now, you just do multiplication. All right. So 3 times 9 is 27. 5 times 1 is 5. And there we are. We now have done examples of multiplication and division. There are a couple of word problems in this section, so let's just do a couple of examples. So Tony has 3/4 of a tank of gas left in his snowmobile. On his way over to JC's, he used up half of his gas. So how much is left in his tank? All right. Still, we know he started with 3/4 of a tank. So that's how much gas Tony had. Okay. Must be a Polaris to use that much gas. But anyway, Tony has 3/4 of a tank of gas left in his snowmobile. On his way over, he used half. So how do you cut things in half? If I asked you to tell me, if I had $10 in front of me, and I said, how would you cut it in half? Most of you would tell me I would divide by 2, and you're correct. So we're going to divide by 2. So 3/4 divided by 2. Okay. The 2 is not a fraction yet. Any whole number, okay, so this is a bit of a side lesson. Any whole number, like the number 2, we can write as a fraction. So I'm going to do this off to the side. So this is kind of a thought bubble or a side note. Okay? Any whole number can be written as a fraction. Written as a fraction by using a denominator of 1. So for example, 2 is equal to 2/1. Because if I asked you what's 2 divided by 1, you're going to look at me because you think it's a trick question. It's just exactly as it is. 2 divided by 1 is 2. Okay? If I give you a 5, so let's say what happens if I said 5, make it a fraction. Okay? 5/1. And then you'd be absolutely correct. So coming back over here, I'm going to put that 2/1, and now it makes it a fraction. So 3/4 divided by 2/1. Well, how do I divide fractions? I leave the first fraction. I change the multiplication. I flip the second fraction. Don't forget my equal sign up front. I then multiply my numerators, multiply my denominators. So 3 times 1 is 3, 4 times 2 is 8. So therefore, Tony now has 3/8 of a tank. 3/8 of a tank. So if you're looking at the gas meter here, all right, on the snowmobile, so here's half a tank, here's empty, here's full, and a lot of them have the 3/4, 1/4. This is where Tony's gauge started. So it was pointing right here to start. And now in blue, he has 3/8 of a tank, and we're going to talk about this in more detail. Oops, be a little bit better drawing there. It's now between 1/2 and 1/4, because that's where 3/8 is. So he used that much gas going over to, say, CJC. All right, so there we go. I'm just going to bubble that up for you. Okay, last example here. Jimmy is saving for Call of Duty 21, or whatever version we're on, and he's decided to keep 2/5 of his weekly earnings in a jar so he can buy the game. If Jimmy made $250 last week and $325 this week, how much money has he saved? So what we're going to do is we're going to start with total money. How much money has he made? Total money. Total money will be week 1 plus week 2. So that means that he made $250 last week plus $325 this week. So $250 and $325, so that's going to be $575. So therefore, he has made $575 in 2 weeks. That's not what the question wants to know. How much has he saved up for the game? So what is 2/5 of his earnings? So what we need to do is we need to take how much money he has, and we got to multiply it by 2/5. So we take the 575, we're going to multiply by 2/5. Now, again, how do you multiply fractions? You multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. 575 doesn't have a denominator. What do? You know how to do it. We just talked about it. You can make any number into a fraction simply by putting it over 1. So 575 times 2 and 5 times 1. So it's going to be over 5. And 575, we double that. That's going to be a 0. And you can use your calculator at this point. 5 carry the 1. 1150 divided by 5. So that would be a 2. And 1150 divided by 5 on your calculator. So you get a 2, carry the 1. $230. All right. So therefore, he has saved $230, which means that he can buy not only Call of Duty, he can likely get all the shirt that goes with it, and maybe the camouflage controller, and whatever else you get nowadays to be cool. So anyhow, if you have any questions, we'll deal with that in the one-on-one.